pretty much the same.
All right, I think we should get started. It's time. I hope I can keep everyone awake before the lunch. That wasn't the case when I was doing chemistry in high school. I was really struggling with that. It looks like based on the faculty room that we are in a chemistry class. So I'm going to be talking about how we're thinking about positioning Drupal Canvas in this sort of new age of AI, which is obviously transforming a lot of things in our industry. Let's see if my clicker wakes up. But before we start, I want to introduce myself. So I'm Lauri Timmanee. I'm the senior product manager at Acquia. I'm overseeing the development of Drupal Canvas, but I also oversee Acquia Source, which is a SaaS CMS product that Acquia launched in 2025. And I also oversee Acquia Site Studio, which is our sort of previous gen site building solution. And I've been part of the Drupal community for 15 years at this point. So, just to sort of connect back to why we wanted to build Drupal Canvas in the first place was to make it really easy for site builders to build sites and make it really fast. And Dries, I'm quoting Dries here, how he introduced this initiative when it was still called Experience Builder back then, that he believes that this is the most important initiative that we can undertake right now. But obviously, since we started all of this, a lot has changed. If you look at the timeline, we started in October 2023, in Drupal Canvas, Dries set the vision, or announced the vision for this, and now, finally in December 2025, we launched Canvas 1.0. So what happened in the meanwhile? Basically, ChatGPT launched right after we announced the initiative, and then a lot of things started changing from there. And especially 2025 was a big year in terms of how you could start seeing how transformational this is going to be for the whole industry of technology. So we started looking into, okay, what does this actually mean for Drupal Canvas? We probably need to update what we thought this would be. And we revisited our roadmaps last year, and now we're doing an even bigger revisit now that the December 2025 release happened. And so basically we started asking the question, what sets us apart in this era of AI? If people are no longer manually drag and dropping things in the interface and they go to an AI prompt, what good does our tool even do at this point then? So we essentially identified 3 key pillars that we believe need to be true for Drupal and Drupal Canvas to succeed, and I'm going to talk about those in my presentation today. So the first one is sort of the baseline expectation for us to be able to succeed, which is that sort of in the initial mission that we had, which was to make building sites fast, is that we just need to make it 10 times faster than we thought we would have to make it. So we have to make it really fast to build these experiences. And how do we do that is we have some ideas how we might be able to do. So some of the challenges we've been fighting for a very long time, I actually have a Mike Herschel quote in here. He's not paying attention, so I need to call him out. Sorry.
What was my quote?
So there is a very complex render system, and there's dragons lurking within the theming layer. And that's been one of the reasons, sort of pre-AI, and still today, the why is really hard to build digital experience websites with Drupal fast. There's also an older quote from the issue that I was able to find that every theme developer is a PHP developer, whether they like it or not. Obviously, this is pre-Twig, so some things have changed in this quote, so I wanted to add the year for accuracy. But I think there's still truth to that this year if you think about pre-process functions and all of that, but you still need to know PHP to be able to write themes. Well, the reality, if you go outside of Drupal, of what the speed means is completely different. So if you go look at Lovable, for example, you write a prompt, and I'm speeding things up so that we don't have to actually wait for the whole thing to take place, but we can see in the timer that how long it actually takes to build. So it was basically one prompt that I gave in this case, and in 1 minute and 54 seconds we got a home page. Obviously there's maybe some refining that we need to do, But to get to that first draft, it's pretty incredible. And this demo is actually, this is from October. What you get out of these tools now is even more impressive than what you were able to get when I recorded this. So this is what we're competing with, essentially, is that you can get these kinds of sites customized to your needs in just a matter of minutes. So what do we need to do to compete with this? So in terms of the aspect of speed, I think there's 3 things that we really need to succeed in order for us to be able to compete with this. So the first item that I want to talk about is this a design system mindset, which is something we've been already working towards before AI disrupted the industry, but it's a key for us to be able to succeed in this journey. I believe the new creation flow with AI is going to be where you basically build with AI, you start with Lovable or Cursor, whatever tool that you built with. And then you try to understand what is it that it did, what did it do well, and then you refine from there. Some of it might be refinements through follow-up prompts that you do yourself. Some of it might be doing refinement using different tools that you have. It might be something like Drupal Canvas, or it might be literally writing code as well. And then finally, once you've went through the whole pipeline of the initial prompt and those tweaks that you made on top of it, you publish your changes, and then you start over again and go back to do maybe like a more substantial change built with AI. So the built with AI beginning state could be built me this site in the very beginning, and then you continue refining there. When you go back to that first state next time, it might be something like, hey, I need to build this kind of campaign in here, and then you refine what that campaign looks like with AI. And so the design system mindset is really important because that helps us isolate, for example, design away from some of the more fundamental aspects of your site, because you can then essentially give your design system for AI to play with. So what we've done with Drupal Canvas, if you went to Balan's presentation, he talked about this a lot more than what I will talk about, but the key to understand here is that in Canvas, you can create components. In Canvas, they also pick up Drupal Canvas components, so whether you are using single directory components, which is in Twig, or JavaScript components, in Canvas they are all the same, and you can just drag them on the page and create content with it. So that's the first key aspect in here, is that you can create components in different ways. But the more important aspect of that is that you can actually build these components once, reuse them for multiple use cases. So if you want to create pages, you can use your components to do that. If you want to create the page template, your header and footer, you can use the same components to do that. So if you create a button component that you want to use on your pages, you can also place that button in your header. You can also use them to create content templates, which is essentially your templates that display content types from Drupal. So those are the different ways of using components that we support today. What's great about this is that the components themselves don't have to know anything about how they will be used later. It's just a design system that you built based on the design that you need, and then later on, when you actually put it together in here, is you just use those components and tell as a site builder or content creator how you want them to be used. So obviously we talk a lot about components. Design systems are much more than components, and there's a lot of effort that we're putting into actually like realizing a full design system implementation in Drupal in terms of providing design tokens in there, providing style APIs. So essentially an abstraction over where Tailwind, where you could, for example, add paddings visually, and it would work nicely with Tailwind. Adding support for things like icon libraries, and then more governance type of things like site templates and slot restrictions, and then example implementations of design systems in the form of site templates. But what are we actually going to do with the design systems next? I think we have to go further than what we've done today. We actually have to revamp the developer experience of key capabilities to sort of match with this design system mindset that we have. So here's a little bit more about the pain point that we've identified, is that essentially to be a front-end developer, like I said, you need to be a PHP developer in your heart to understand all of these concepts that we have in here. That's what we're solving with components. And the challenge we have right now with Drupal today is that the things that we've moved to Canvas, you don't have to worry about these things. But with the things that still use, that haven't been moved to Canvas, then you use this system, the old system still. So what we have to do is essentially increase what are the use cases that you can do with the new mindset, the new architecture that we have. An example of that could be, for example, views. If we look at views, this is a screenshot of Views UI. Views is obviously a tool where you build a query where you define your filters and sort of what you are fetching from the database. But Views is not just a query builder, it is also a UI builder. Like if you look at these aspects of the Views UI, it's essentially something that you could do in something like Drupal Canvas, which is a visual tool, or in here. And this is obviously not now following the design system mindset that we have. This is still following the Drupal, the old way of doing things. And so, which means that, for example, to customize the fields and the HTML list, you still have to go to the pre-process and all of that to be able to deal with it. So, essentially, views is query plus display coupled in views. Views is one example. It's not the only example. We have other examples. Like if you think about web forms, it's the same paradigm still. It's essentially it's a display builder of what is the form that gets built, but it's also a data storage builder because it builds you what is it that we need to store in the database. So again, it's display plus data coupled in web forms, which makes it, again, it forces you to go through those layers of complexity that you have to deal with. So the great thing about Canvas is that it actually allows you to, besides using these design system-centric components, it allows you to actually place these old concepts that Drupal had, like web forms and views using blocks. So they are exposed into Drupal Canvas. That's sort of an intermediary solution so that we don't have to rewrite everything at once. However, in order to move towards that design system-centric mindset, we actually have to move blocks over to single directory components and JavaScript components. So that's the direction that we have to take in the long run. And just to sort of put it in really plain terms in terms of like what the experience might be in future, what the simplification is, that I showed you the layers of complexity that you have to learn in order to build something using the existing system. Then if you go to the Drupal Canvas ways, you really have to know two things most of the time. You would just need to know Canvas is where you place the components, and then you have to know how to build your components itself. But you don't have to know any of the underlying parts because it's all essentially encapsulated to these two places. There's no pre-process hooks, that's not supported by SDCs. There's Twig templates, but it depends on what kind of components you use. You know, so you don't necessarily have to learn Twig templates. You can use JavaScript components if that's what you know. And you don't have to know even team suggestions because it's just plain out components. Everything is encapsulated in there. So essentially the point of this pillar that we are working towards is to now repeat what we had done for content templates, which is essentially a replacement for managed display in Drupal, for other similar use cases, so that you can benefit from the same improvements in there. Then finally, how we actually get to the speed part is once we've been able to actually move things over, the components, is we need to enable external AI to work with Drupal. So the belief here is that we've built obviously tooling to help you build in browser, but not everything will happen through the browser. If you go to serious development tasks, you will have to, you will have to go away from that. We need to make Drupal the best CMS to work with an assisted workflow where AI is taking over parts of the development. We believe Drupal is very well positioned for that because of our commitment to validated data structures and APIs. So that positions us really well to succeed in here. We just have to realize that vision and actually make it reality. Here's just some. This is already possible today. We are working on improvements to tooling in this so that it's easier to succeed with this. But here's, for example, one site that I built. I believe I built this in October. Essentially, in one evening, I was able to build this one site just by prompting AI. And this is all built essentially as components in Canvas. It was not a very complex site from sort of business requirements perspective, but it was probably the most complex one that I've built so far from design perspective. You can see some funky grids and things like that, and all of that was something that I was able to achieve by just writing prompts. I didn't do a ton of manual coding on this. So how this workflow actually will look like is we are working on a development starter kit that you can use with your existing tools. That could be Cursor, Claude Code, whatever tools that you use. Codex is now came up as a new one. Our tooling is not necessarily hard coded doing any specific tooling. So even without us doing anything, once Codex was released, we were compatible with it. Then once you've used those tools in there, you can use the CLI import and export for importing your components into Canvas, and that's how you do your AI created website. Obviously, that's the first step of this. There's other things that we have to add in here. So instead of just relying on the CLI import export of your components, we're also looking into adding MCP servers so that you can actually then control other aspects of your site through MCP. And that way, in here where you're building your site with AI, it could actually create components, but it could also pre-configure some underlying things in Drupal through MCP. All right, so the first pillar was we need to make it really fast to build digital experiences with Drupal. But that doesn't necessarily differentiate us against Lovable. Like, that's what Lovable already does. It's just that we need to match that speed that they offer. So now we can get to the parts where we are actually thinking, okay, how do we actually then differentiate against these other tools that you can build with really fast? So this kind of goes into the heart and center of Drupal, which is the CMS. And what the CMS ultimately enables you to do is to build sites at scale through collaboration. The sites that we build are usually not the ones where you would have one person, the developer, just adding things in there. There's other things, and we've gone through this cycle before, where in the beginning of the century, Dreamweaver was said, in quotes, to take over the whole web development space. And I've seen some pretty interesting numbers where maybe 60% of the industry was using it at a given point back then. Still, CMS became a thing because of, obviously, you don't want to be managing static files. It doesn't allow your content creators to manage any of your content. So there's many reasons why CMS is still relevant, even though these tools were supposedly taking over the world. So it feels very similar. I feel like there's the same pattern that we feel like, hey, AI is going to take over the whole web development space. It's probably going to take a part of it, but there's still aspects of it that are really hard for it to get right. So in order for us to succeed, we need to make the CMS that we provide a really strong one in there. And there's three key aspects of that we have to succeed in. The first one is that we need to provide a really simple user experience, and that's what enables that scale. So in order for your broader team, your content creators, marketers, whoever it is that manages content on your site, in order for them to be able to use the system, they need to have an easy-to-use tool to work with. And so that's something that we've been working towards for a long time, and that remains relevant even though there's been changes in the market. And that's obviously what we've worked a lot on with Drupal Canvas, is to build interfaces that feel natural to use for users who are accustomed to using other tools in the industry. So if you've used tools like PowerPoint, for example, it should feel familiar to use Drupal Canvas. We've tried to bring those kinds of concepts from there. So you essentially just drag and drop when you select your components in the preview in the middle. The form on the right sidebar updates contextually based on that. When you make changes to the content on the right sidebar, you see a preview of those changes immediately, and so on. This is all things that are easy to take granted because of a lot of the tools that we use these days actually provide these tools. But even to meet those table stakes, it actually takes a lot of effort to be able to meet it. So it's still a pillar that we need to focus on to make sure that we get it right, because it's been one of the weaknesses that we've had in the past. So that's how you can create content with Canvas with the easy experience. In terms of, like I said, this is still an important area of focus for us. We've made a lot of progress on this. We are conducting user research and refining the UX over time, so you can expect that the experience will get even better as time goes by. And this is an area where if you have any feedback for us, we're definitely open for suggestions on how we could make things even smoother. The great thing is that we've modernized how we are building the application itself. We've re-architected the whole how we build things, which allows us to add new things there much more easily. So, for example, adding keyboard shortcuts or updating, showing different information in the interface is much easier than what it was before we did that re-architecting with Drupal Canvas. So, the second capability beyond simple user experience is to focus on our content modeling capabilities, and that's where we started with Drupal Canvas in terms of making sure that content modeling is made easy through Drupal Canvas. What we started with is essentially what is the experience of displaying your modeled content with Drupal Canvas. So in this example, I created a content type to display tours. It uses the Drupal's existing form that you know of. I've created a couple of example pieces of content in here, and I'm going to enter Drupal Canvas now. So what I want to do is I want to essentially create a display for a single tour. And this is where you can see some of that decoupling mindset, where we are going to be using components from our component library instead of inside out, where you are choosing data and then data gets formatted from there. Unfortunately, the top is a little bit cut, but what I was showing there is that you can select which piece of content is used for rendering the preview. And when you're creating these content templates, the interface is still the same as what you would use for creating pages. It's that there are some additional tools that now allow you to connect the content on that right sidebar. Instead of filling them manually, you can now connect them back into the form that you filled in the CMS. And so essentially, creating these templates becomes as simple as it is to create pages, or at least really close to that. It's also using the same components. The nice thing about this is that you can still use all of the settings that you provided for the components. So we saw before where we were essentially connecting content like I'm connecting here, but you can still use the rest that you're not connecting back into the form to configure those components how they look like. It's just that then essentially those settings are going to be the same for every entry in your CMS. What you may notice here is that the options change depending on what I'm connecting. So the options that are shown here are automatically filtered based on the field type that you have available in that form. So for example, an image wouldn't be shown when you're connecting to a text field. So that makes it, again, much more friendly for a non-technical user to fill in these. You don't necessarily have to learn a ton yourself. The great thing about the consistency here of using the same tool is that you saw I was doing copy and paste in there. We saw the same in the page building demo. So when we built that for page building, it became available for our content template building as well. So it really acts like a single product where the same tools are available regardless of the task that is in hand. I'm previewing with another content entry so we can see everything looks good. The nice thing about the preview is like I was going back and forth there, trying to select what looks good, what doesn't. So the nice thing of seeing the preview is that you can immediately decide if you like, if you don't like. And now when we publish the changes and went back into the CMS, we can navigate to review what the page actually looks like once it's published. So this is the content templates feature that I talked about before, which we are now planning to replicate to other capabilities as well. So that's the first capability that we've added to really make building content models and more simpler. There's other things that we're planning to add in here, and that's where the enhancements, when you compare against AI, really start to pay off. Is, for example, translation support. So if you have a static code base, which is HTML or JavaScript pages, adding translations becomes really difficult in there. How do you send those to a translation management system at that point? I bet your translator doesn't want to be updating your React components. Or, and we're adding things like entity reference props that allow you to reuse your CMS content outside of the pages. So let's say you could create a product card component which just references the product content type. And now if you need to add product cards to the home page, you don't have to fill in, you don't need to duplicate the data in there. You just reference the product and it automatically fills up the card for you. And then finally, we are planning to also add the support for actually editing your CMS content, so nodes within Canvas, so then you have a unified experience of doing all of that. So obviously a big part of why CMS enables scale is governance. So that's things like permissions and so on. Canvas has a pretty basic governance model today, which already helps actually a lot because it allows you to at least isolate who can publish and who cannot. So here I'm, for example, making a change in here because I have a permission to edit this. Then there's, in the preview changes panel, you can see what those changes are. So you could have another user coming in and previewing those changes. You can configure your permissions so that one user has a permission to edit content in Canvas and another user has a permission to publish them. So that way, if you have less experienced content creators that go into Canvas, you can give them the permission to do edits without the right to publish. And then your more experienced content people, they can come in and then actually do the publish. So these are essentially the permissions that we have. So we have a lot of administer permissions for things like administering your folders and things like that. And then we have those permissions for our pages. That's something we are planning to expand in future with custom workflows. Because today, as I mentioned, it's sort of permission-based, where if you can have one user with the right to publish, one user with the right to edit. In some cases, you need things like a legal review, or maybe translations needs to be a workflow step in there. That's something we're planning to add support for in future, and that way you can then essentially leverage advanced content workflows with Canvas as well. So those are the capabilities we are planning to add to improve our content management capabilities. The final category, the final pillar, which is probably the most important one and the hardest to replicate, is an ecosystem of community modules for advanced use cases. And this one is actually one that sets successful and failed products apart oftentimes. If you even go back to, for example, why did Nokia fail? One of the fundamental reasons why it's believed that they failed was because they didn't manage to establish an ecosystem of apps, because they weren't able to convince developers to build on their platform. It was like one of the key fundamental reasons that why it was hard for them to succeed. And that's something Drupal has been able to pull off, where we have a massive ecosystem of modules, which means that integrations to different platforms are much easier than if you didn't have those things. It's obviously it's not scalable for a single small team to do all of those things, unlike how it is for the community that is able to essentially maintain this set of tens of thousands of community modules. The challenge we have in here is that our interface oftentimes is a bit too hard to use. Some of it comes down to some of the earlier things that I mentioned around the design systems, but there's probably more around this that we have to do to just apply a design system mindset. So what should we do to make our module ecosystem to turn into the biggest competitive advantage of Drupal? The first thing I strongly believe we should be doing, and we are focused on this, is to consolidate our baseline capabilities. So I had an emphasis on this value pillar on the advanced use cases. Our module ecosystem should be focused on the advanced use cases, not on the baseline capabilities. Almost every user or every developer who sets up a Drupal site, they expect to have clean and readable URLs. They expect to be able to set up SEO meta tags and open graph settings. They expect to be able to do redirects, set up contact forms, and so on. And this is something where we haven't succeeded in the past, is to actually provide this baseline capability as sort of one package that you can download easily. And the reason why this is a problem is first, there's users who don't even realize that you can have these capabilities in Drupal, because it can be hard to, like, clean and readable URLs. Like, how do you know that you need to download the path auto unless you've been in Drupal for a while? You might assume that Drupal as a product doesn't support that. You just have to fill in everything manually, and then you reject it as a solution. So obviously we've started this journey with Drupal CMS that you've probably heard of. So Drupal CMS builds on top of Drupal core and adds those baseline capabilities into a single package that you can download, and it's now being promoted as the sort of primary downloadable of Drupal. And then on top of Drupal CMS, we have those advanced use cases. So those could be third-party integrations or other sort of industry-specific tools that doesn't make sense for us to include in the baseline package. So, and how we're thinking about this setup is essentially where Drupal core is sort of the core framework, if you will, which is different from what it was before, because before we were considering Drupal core as the product that we ship. An example of where it changes how we think about Drupal core is, for example, search module or contact module. They were considered sort of minimalistic versions of the product to ship there, but they're actually not what most of the community has adopted, because of it. They only support the very small use case in there. So we are considering what to do with those use cases. How do we actually then bring in the baseline framework capabilities like web form or search API in Drupal core? And then you have Drupal CMS, which puts it together as the baseline product. So maybe to go back, for example, search API, Drupal core might provide search API, and then Drupal CMS would provide all the configuration to make search API easy to use, so that it's productized and just works when you download it. So in reality, still today, we have this baseline capabilities that are existing as community extensions. So they're not. Some of them are in Drupal CMS, some of them are not. So we need to figure out. We need to find a way, essentially as a community, to align on what are the baseline capabilities. How do we bring those into Drupal CMS or Drupal core, so that they are not separate modules or something that you need to download as a separate package. If it's in Drupal CMS, it can still be a separate module. Drupal CMS obviously just like collects modules from the ecosystem into one. That's what helps improve the user experience for someone who is starting with, and they get a realistic expectation on what Drupal can actually do. So there's a re-evaluation of modules that is still in progress. So we are evaluating should contact module go out. I think there's a decision that it will go out. Then there's, on the other hand, a discussion, what should we do about path auto? Should that be in Drupal core then instead? Because it's sort of just expected to be there. Like I said, search API. Search probably needs to go out, and search API needs to come in. Then meta tag, maybe that is just something that we need to bring in. So that's work in progress. We're doing discovery on what to do here, but the key takeaway is that there's a big mindset shift in how we are looking at what modules, what capabilities we offer in which of these packages, which might also change how you as a user consume or at least download Drupal as a product. The second pillar here is that we need to improve the consistency with the user experience that we're delivering with Drupal Canvas. So obviously our module ecosystem has some modules are more user-friendly than others, we need to raise that bar to be closer to what we're doing with Drupal Canvas. And the challenge is that if you talk to someone who is not familiar with Drupal, they expect that the community extensions that you download to at least have a similar level of quality to what our baseline products have. And obviously, like with Canvas, it's a huge leap forward now. So we need to now figure out how do we then essentially replicate that across these other modules. Some of it is us providing different kinds of extension points that help add consistency. An example of that is, for example, if we think about extending the node edit form, the content edit form today, there's no APIs there except for alter and maybe the widgets for the individual things. But basically, the primary way of injecting something in here would be form alter. Form alter is like, free for all, do whatever you want, which doesn't establish any sort of best practices for this. Canvas is taking a slightly different approach where we are setting up deliberate APIs for extensions to integrate with Canvas. An example of this is, for example, this extension API that we have, which opens up a given module in an extension panel. It gets context about the page that is being viewed and the state of the system, so it can interact with it. But it is sort of in a bounded box, and we've defined that, hey, this is how the user experience is, instead of allowing them to just add things randomly in places in the interface. So what we need to do in here is identify what are the other patterns that exist. Like, for example, if you look at the Acquia web governance example that I showed, maybe it doesn't make sense actually to have the web governance in this module. Maybe we should have a specific API for content quality checking purposes, so that you can run them on publish, and you can provide a single integrated view of different content publishing checks that you might have, because you might have one thing that is checking your readability, then another tool that is checking maybe your accessibility, and so on. So we just need to identify what those patterns are and build them. This is also something where we're doing discovery. If you have any thoughts or even ideas on what we should do in Drupal Canvas, any ideas would be welcome. And then, finally, what we need to do is, because we have 10,000 plus modules, we need to focus on making sure that the most important, the most valuable modules that we have, the ones that actually has the most impact, are perfected first. And that's something that we've struggled with, I think, as a community in the past, because it's been sort of free for all. We haven't necessarily tried to actually focus on saying that, hey, like, if we did these three things, we could then essentially sell for or Drupal could become a viable option for universities as a consequence. It's been more like, maybe there's 2 out of 3 things for universities that we've solved, and then the one is missing, and then you sort of luck out on that opportunity because of that. The big, like I said, the big focus for content modules needs to be on integrations. And integrations are really important when organizations are evaluating what solutions they are going with. And we are first focusing on looking for key integrations that would be evaluated when customers or users are choosing their CMS. Here's an example of how we've improved the MailChimp integration. So when you go to the project browser, you install it. There's an authenticate button that takes you to MailChimp. You log in MailChimp, and you essentially authenticate in there. You give permissions, and it just takes you back in Drupal. So essentially, this was a way more convoluted process before, where you had to like manually enter a whole bunch of things and sort of just know how to do it. It was some work that needed to be done, but it wasn't actually that much. And then as a result, we have very easy setup for MailChimp. So this was obviously just the authentication and sort of configuration part. The second part is to imagine how do we actually then use that given integration. And for example, in the case of MailChimp, that meant that we need to provide a component that allows you to display the form on a page. So when you've authenticated, when you've configured the module, it automatically provides you this component that you can then place on a Canvas page. And that's how we close the loop. So obviously that's just one example. that was just to give you an idea of what the experience should be in an ideal state, even for an integration. What I believe is the broader sort of how we solve this problem is something that Dries has been talking a lot about, is site templates. The reason why site templates help us solve this problem is because of when you build a site template, you target a specific use case with it, which forces you to think, what does a user who is evaluating this for a given use case actually need from our product? Which now makes you evaluate, okay, these are the modules that you need to actually bundle this into the site template, for example, for a university, which then forces that person to think about, okay, what do we need to improve about that experience? So I believe site templates is the key for us to unlock industry verticals with Drupal. Obviously, we need more than a few of these. We need actually a whole marketplace, a whole set of site templates so that we have all of the necessary, all of the key industry verticals unlocked with it. And that's a mindset shift from the previous statement of Drupal, where we said that Drupal is flexible, you can do anything with it, just figure it out. Now it's actually we're deliberately saying that, hey, we've configured this for you, you can see how it works in here. You still have all the flexibility to configure it how you like, but we actually show and tell this is how it works. So those are the three key pillars that I believe that Drupal needs to focus on in order for us to succeed in the era of AI. So first is to enable building ambitious digital experiences fast. Then is to enable content creation and site building at scale through the CMS collaboration tools that we provide. And then we need this ecosystem of community modules for the advanced use cases. So essentially moving baseline capabilities away from just standalone extensions, and then highlighting and amping up our advanced use cases in there. If you're interested to get involved, I try to think what are the best ways to do it today. So I think the first one is this: Drupal Canvas is released, use it, build sites with it, provide us feedback if something breaks with it, so we can actually make it better for the next one. You can help us actually improve the tooling that we are providing. You don't have to even contribute to something as complex as Drupal Canvas. It can be one of the modules that you care about. Think about how people are actually using it and make it easier for them to use, similar to what we had done with the MailChimp. What's interesting about the MailChimp example that I provided, MailChimp actually paid us to improve the experience. So it wasn't like where we just, out of our good free will, did it. MailChimp paid us to do it. So maybe there's other opportunities for us to go after. Drupal is still it has a massive user base. So there's a lot of benefit for them to improve how it is to adopt their product within our product. And then we're focused on this outside-in AI, where you can use Claude Code or Cursor externally in your computer and then import it into Drupal. If that's something that you're using as a workflow already today, I would be very interested to hear about your experiences, what are the pain points that you're facing, and essentially any ideas to just help us narrow down on how to approach that would be really valuable for us. We have a bunch of Slack channels on Drupal Stack, and the primary one is Drupal Canvas. So feel free to join there. You can ask questions there and provide us feedback. It's actually gotten pretty active now, so that's kind of nice to see, because there's a bunch of people who are actually building sites with Drupal Canvas. All right, so that's really the content that I had for today. I think we can do a couple questions if there's any room. All right.
Yeah, I think the last time I saw you talking about Drupal Canvas, and you had on the list of upcoming things, I might be wrong, but I thought paragraphs was on there. Has that gotten done, or is it dropped off, or am I wrong?
So paragraphs is related to adoption from existing sites. So I would say that there hasn't been a ton of momentum on making the existing sites happen right now. It's not something that the Acquia team has been working on, so there was a couple community members who were really focused on that. I'm not really sure what's happened, so I have to say that this hasn't been a focus in the last 6 months or so. So there's some proof of concepts that have been built for it, but it never got any further from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
once someone's built Drupal Canvas 2 trees, and obviously you're reversing new stuff, what's the perceived plan for upgrading from 2 to the next version? Is that going to be easy enough?
So I don't know what Drupal CMS 3 is planning to actually include or not. So from Drupal CMS 1 to 2, there wasn't an upgrade path in that sense where you could actually easily get the Drupal CMS 2 features into Drupal CMS 1. I don't have we don't know what is in Drupal CMS 3 yet, so I can't tell if that's going to be the same experience or not. What's great about Drupal CMS though is that it's just essentially bundling a bunch of contributed modules to your site, which means that even if you don't upgrade to Drupal CMS 2.0, which wasn't a thing that you can do, it doesn't mean that your site somehow goes end of life, because it's really just a Drupal site that was built with contributed modules. So it's really more just a question of, can you get the features that are coming up in future? From my perspective, and sort of what I'm advocating for, so I'm not a product manager for Drupal CMS specifically. What I've been advocating for is that we should make it easier for users to adopt upcoming features that come with Drupal CMS 3, so that you don't have to evaluate ever, like, the Drupal CMS 3 is coming in 6 months. Should I wait 6 months until I start so that I can get those features or not? Or should I start now with the features that we have? So I believe that we should support upgrading and getting those features, but that's not my decision, so I don't know what's going to happen.
It seems like you should be able to use recipes for that.
Yeah, the challenge is that if you started with something, like it can be a quite, like, you can replicate everything that Drupal CMS 2 provides in your Drupal CMS 1 site. Right. It's not like a one command, one click of a button that does it. So, yeah.
It's very nice.
All right.
Very exciting to see all this. Thanks for the updates. Since you mentioned universities, the first thing that comes to mind is multi-site and orchestration. And since we're moving towards a more decoupled kind of approach, shouldn't it be easier? Like, now that it's not like PHP talking to one database, but we have components using web services talking to this Drupal data source, to mix and match, different Drupal CMS instances or even WordPress JSON data sources so that your landing pages can glue together stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That multi-site is something that especially universities with different faculties and so on need. The architecture of design system first does help with that use case as well. So that's a good point. In terms of universities as general, like universities, even though I mentioned it as an example, hasn't been so far the number one focus for us because of the universities, generally just the complexity that you deal with in there, so it's a bit higher than from other types of marketing scenarios. So universities, I believe, will be a future focus for us to unlock because it's a huge user base for Drupal. But that said, even though it hasn't been a primary focus for the team, we've actually seen universities like, Syracuse University, for example, already adopted Drupal Canvas on their end, and they've already went live with it as well. So I'm actually very curious to talk to them at some point to hear what their experiences are, so that we could maybe replicate what they've succeeded with to other universities as well.
Is there a roadmap for Canvas?
So,
Is there a roadmap for Canvas?
There isn't a public roadmap right now. I've been working on getting a public roadmap for Drupal Canvas. I hope that in the next, my goal is to get it published by DrupalCon, so that then we have like a public single canonical source of truth for this is what we believe is happening next. Obviously roadmaps for any open source project where which Drupal Canvas is always a bit challenging. So I can obviously do a roadmap from a little bit of an Acquia perspective, like these are the priorities from what I think they are, but they don't always reflect the reality fully because of we often get contributors just jumping in on a certain feature, and then it might actually bring something that is in the future to happen next. But at the same time, it might also encourage people to say that, hey, if this is the sort of official roadmap, maybe it helps other people to then jump in on things that are coming later on. But yeah, it is in the plans.
I think first, thanks. This is wonderful. This is probably one of the more exciting things in Drupal I've seen in a very long time. My question is literally the same thing as their official roadmap. There's a lot of cool features that are coming. So
Yeah.
just when can we expect that? So
Yeah. All right. Awesome.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So when you use AI to create a component, does it create a single directory component, or is it just in config?
It's the tooling that we're working on right now is focused on JavaScript code components, just because of AI is really good at writing JavaScript.
Okay.
It doesn't mean I'm actually working with some folks in the community to see if we could replicate what we are doing with JavaScript code components to work with single directory components
That'll be
as well. It's just that it's like it needs to be a superset of what we do with the JavaScript code components, because we sort of need to have more essentially AI skills for the twig use case.
Okay. It's
For them to work.
pretty cool when
Yeah.
it works. I mean,
Uh,
this is absolutely the future of Drupal. Like, this and AI is everything.
Yeah.
Going forward, absolutely.
So something I do want to mention in Mercury, which is the starter kit theme that is being used by Drupal CMS, there is an agents.md file in there already, which I created when I was like refactoring some of the components to at least have a partial set of rules that you need to follow when you're working with AI on SDCs. So that's one to look at, but I have to admit that it's not complete. I've never actually built a full site with that, and I think it needs
Sure.
to be expanded on to be able to support that.
Sorry to come back to the roadmap that you said. I'm going to do it from the point of view of Acquia, that you know, of course, what we know when we work there. I worked for Acquia for 10 years, but shouldn't it be also include like call it the little guys? We have several companies working on that. We have Dripjar, we have TechSide, we have Pido, that really shows that the community, and we created the IXPs, we need the little guys also to use Drupal, but if we keep aiming to MarTech and the integrations with software,
Yep.
you said 52%, but if you include other markets, if you include the low budget markets like Latin America, Asia, Africa, that is not true. They're not, it's not 52% using those two. It is a very small percentage, it's maybe 52% of potential Acquia customers.
Yeah.
So will the roadmap be thinking about that as well? Because it's the only way we can regrow Drupal.
Yeah, so I do want to highlight that what I meant by Acquia perspective is that it's what our team is working on. And when we set up that roadmap, we take into different inputs to it, which is including internal Acquia considerations, but it's also external community-facing considerations. So it's combining those two. Obviously, like if, for example, you mentioned companies that are using Canvas, if they are willing to commit to a deliverable in our roadmap, which we have done, for example, with Drupal CMS, where we've had agencies making commitments to deliver certain capabilities, I would be more than happy to include those in our roadmap. It doesn't have to be just Acquia-based roadmap, but it's just that that's the only thing that right now I can say that those are the things that we are sort of committed to do, and then other things would have to be added on based on what kind of commitments we would be getting. But I think that's a great conversation in terms of like how do we facilitate that kind of conversation, because of if there are organizations that want to commit to doing things, how do we make it first clear that that's something that we are open to doing, and then just how do we facilitate it?
And to be clear, I think I put it that way not to put Acquia on the spot, but to put the rest of us on the spot. Because we are letting Acquia do things, which is amazing. They're contributing so much. And I can tell since I was in, and I'm working with the Latin American community a lot, I get the question, we're getting too complicated, we're getting too enterprising. Is Acquia leading that? Is pushing for that? The answer is no. But the reality is the customer and the experience of the team, that is the team paid to do this, is enterprising. So it's us and the rest of the community that are working with the small size, the $2,000 website, the $5,000, the $10,000, the $20,000 website, we should chip in as well, as Lauri is saying, and say, you know what, that's awesome, but most people need this. And we've seen it. FlexSide with the cheaper hosting, Macy I know is also working on stuff like that, giving AI to be more available, Dripjar with the teams, the site templates that we're talking about. I know Centaro and Ryan have been talking about how he envisioned that, which I love his position about it. but we're letting, and it's not a bad thing, thank you, but we're letting one point of view. And I remember being in Acquia, and I know this after I left Acquia, or seeing it, is we don't have that view because our customers have the needs of a big company. So when somebody in Latin America used to tell me, we're missing, Composer is too complicated, I didn't see it. All my customers was easy for them, they have development teams. And then you come out and like, actually they don't.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the insight there for sure. I'm more than happy to facilitate all of that to happen. And I also acknowledge that obviously like the roadmap that we have, it represents the needs of the customers that I've talked to. And I do have to admit that I'm talking both to Acquia and non-Acquia customers there, but obviously I have easier access to Acquia customers, so there's some bias in, you know, the selection over there. Yeah. All right. Thank you. If you have any additional questions,